Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Cara. Hello, hello. Thank you so much, Shiva. Thank you, Izzy. Thank you to all the volunteers, Ariane, Andrea. It's such a delight to be here, and thank you all for showing up. What a treat. So, I'm a transdisciplinary artist and educator. I'm queer, I'm trans, but because of societal limits, when I grew up, I didn't get to be a queer or trans teenager. And this is something that I actively mourn. I only came to know and understand queerness and transness really as an adult. So, whether I'm working in photography, sculpture, printmaking, performance, I'm regularly trying to make work that contributes to my community finding themselves and having support structures earlier than I was able to. This is going to be a loose retelling of Phantom Tits, a three-volume graphic novel which I co-produced with the incredible Pascal Arpin, who, right at the back, there is a laser pointer, but I don't want to blind anyone. Tonight I'll be sharing Pascal's incredible illustrations out of sequence and remixed, because I didn't want to bore Pascal, to reframe this story and tell you a little bit about how it came to be, or at least parts of it. It was 2012. The gene specialist met me in a bright and sterile office at the Ottawa hospital. I'd been waiting months to hear the results of my test. The room had a healthy supply of Kleenex boxes, a sign of the bad news that they were in the business of delivering. Though being found to carry a cancer gene mutation is definitely bad news, things were slightly different for me. Where most felt this to signal the potential of a life cut short, for me, it actually signaled the start of a life I'd only been able to imagine. It felt deeply wrong, and I had only confided in a few friends that while a negative result, so like not having the cancer gene, would be a welcome relief, a positive result would not be altogether unwelcome, as it would line me up for surgeries that were otherwise difficult to access. It meant no gender assessment, or having to prove myself to anyone. In a way, the medical system, the structure of the medical system, had me kind of hoping for a cancer gene. I hadn't told the doctors or nurses that I'd encountered that I was trans. It was actually just better to put up with the misgendering than take on the burden of educating them, risk deal with any lack of understanding or resistance, and I was legitimately scared that telling them that I was trans might impact the kind of care I would receive, and instantly shut down possibilities that they were so willing and glad to offer me as a non-trans person. Months earlier, my father, after receiving a positive result, had reached out and advised me to seek genetic counseling. His mother, both of his sisters had survived breast cancer, and he was worried that he might have passed the cancer gene mutation on to his children. The doctor was calm and composed, and she smiled at me warmly as she took her seat across from me. Her demeanor, the tone of her voice, even the way she'd walked into the room, had already given away the information that was in the envelope. Okay, wait, let's jump back 10 years to 2002. In my early 20s, I moved to Ottawa. Whoa, what's happening? Ottawa, to pursue a master's in Canadian art history. During my undergraduate degree, I'd studied printmaking, photography, sculpture, but toward the end of my degree, I felt completely ill-equipped to start a career as a visual artist. History had always been a favorite subject of mine, and as the child of two English teachers, I knew how to write a decent essay, which meant that I'd done actually quite well in my art history classes, where I was being introduced to feminist and queer artists whose work I was strangely feeling inspired by. Artists like Romaine Brooks, who was a lesbian interior designer, illustrator, incredible oil painter, lived on the left bank of the Seine in Paris in the 1920s, which was like a hotbed of lesbian and gay activity. Featured in the middle, it's a self-portrait. The Guerrilla Girls, an incredible collective of art world professionals, artists, activists, writers, curators, who just started counting who was being represented in museums and who wasn't, and then would make these posters and post them up in neighborhoods around galleries. Call out culture pre-Twitter, pre-internet, right? Rebecca Belmore, incredible Anishinaabe Ojibwe artist, who really taught me that you don't really need an audience to make art. You can just respond urgently to political injustice in the moment as it happens. And artists Lori Milan and Shauna Dempsey here in their incredible guise as the Lesbian Rangers, which is a performance project they did to like protect and survey the fragile lesbian ecosystem. I didn't explore my queerness until my late 20s. Things have progressed wickedly fast in the last 40 years. But I grew up in a starkly heteronormative environment. I was a child in the 80s, a teenager in the 90s. We barely had the internet by the late 90s. Gay slurs were business as usual, and everything in my life was structured to prevent queerness. When I moved to Ottawa, I saw the relocation to a new city as an opportunity to reinvent myself. Don't get excited. Given my lack of understanding and lack of knowledge, I ran with that agenda in the completely wrong direction. As a child and then teenager, I had very strong tomboy inclinations. Regularly on a skateboard, raiding my father's closet. Despite my mother's best attempts to put me in skirts and floral patterns, I'd never warmed up to femininity. But as I got older, I felt the pressure of conformity, as my tomboyishness was increasingly being equated with a lack of professionalism. Future survival seemed very much dependent upon my ability to be feminine. So when I moved to Ottawa, I came here with the very distinct intention of convincing everyone of my professional capabilities as an art historian lady. Having a classic gay background in theater, I was good at playing dress-up and knew how to move my body and convincingly play a role. I even managed to convince myself there for a while. I also altogether abandoned any aspirations I had of being an artist. In 2005, I had an interview for a job at the National Gallery of Canada. My plan to become an art historian lady was falling into place, and as I continued to repress my inner desires. At the time, I had 3 roommates who were all law students, so I had access to a very deep closet of professional binary gender-appropriate attire. For my interview, I wore my roommate's 2-piece red suit. The interview was a success, and a week later, I was invited back to sign my work contract. I wore my roommate's black suit to maintain the charade. As my new manager, Gary, walked me out of the gallery, he motioned to a young, punky-looking kid, skateboard in hand, a rip in her jeans, stretched earlobes. He said, "Cara, this is Pascal, one of your coworkers." 10 years my junior, without even saying a word, Pascal upended some of the harmful ideas I'd internalized about who I thought I should be. Let's skip ahead to 2013, when I had top surgery. Shortly after my hospital visit, while healing, doing some online shopping for new clothes to complement my slick new chest, I'm on a website and I get prompted to create an account, which requires me to come up with a password. The week of recovery has felt strange as I adjust to my new body, and I'm on a lot of painkillers. Not wearing a bra feels like I'm in my pajamas all the time. And as the freezing starts to wear off, I can feel like the nerves where they were severed, and how they would have stretched through that empty space where my breasts used to live. I was feeling a distinctly phantom limb sensation. Even now, touching my chest, I can locate the nerve endings that used to be like my nipples. For a password, I choose the word phantom tits. Phantom tits, which instantly amuses me. Lying in my bed recovering, I start to dream phantom tits into existence. A superhero creation story told across the classic 22 pages of a comic book. But wait a second, we gotta back this up. I've completely jumped over a chapter because by the time I'm lying in that bed recovering, I have found my way back to making art. I've also found my way into my gender identity. So in a nutshell, how do I go from gender conforming art historian lady to gender non-conforming artist? Where meeting Pascal certainly flipped some notions I had about gender on its head, art and the creative process really allowed me to follow that up by giving me room to ask questions of myself and of the world and slowly find my way towards answers. As the art historian lady with a part-time job at the National Gallery, I'd gotten an additional gig, a job teaching art history at Algonquin College. Early in my teaching career, I was learning as much as I was teaching. And when it came time to teach the 20th century, I quickly started to absorb the lessons of feminist and performance artists, like Cara Tierney here performing an iconic piece called Interior Scroll, where she pulls a scroll out of her vulva and reads from it as though her body is speaking to us. Or the work of Yoko Ono, who sits on stage and places a pair of scissors and invites the audience to come and cut clothes away from her, instantly making manifest and visible the potential for violence, but also care that simmers beneath our interpersonal relationships. Or Elsa von Freytag-Loringhoven, also known as the Baroness, who in the beginning of the 20th century really flaunted all social norms and challenged public space by donning really outlandish attire, writing incredible Dadaist poetry, and I think challenging pretty much anyone who came into contact with them. And the artist Della Grace Volcano, intersex activist, photographer, whose work was censored here in North America in the 90s. They documented queer leather dyke scenes and produced visuals that I think really challenged the way people understood gender and how we sequence gender into an understanding of the body. I'd also met some local performance artists, and I'd found a way to create my own kinds of meaning without needing a studio, spaces, or equipment. Each performance became a way for me to ask questions and through the creative process find answers. So in my first performance, I wore my prom dress, waxed my bikini line, and with each strip that would come off of my crotch, I would place it on my face to make a mask. Oh, right. Thank you. In a subsequent performance, also wearing the prom dress, had a lot of work to do to unload what the weight of that dress, which my mother made, by the way, so it was like a very heavy burden. I took over a bathroom for the duration of an event, got ready for a fictitious prom, and then finished by covering myself head to toe in foundation and like obliterating all of the details that I'd spent hours crafting. So performance done at Gallery 101, where I was really thinking about language and how language boxes us in, and how access to language can be incredibly liberating, while it can also be quite constraining. So I'm spray painting words that had been affixed to my body on panels, which were then assembled into a cube, which I am inside of, and I flopped around like it's a dice, and then broke out of. And yes. As I'm like thinking through how my body is perceived as I'm moving through space and things are shifting for me, I did a performance really thinking about the way public space is gendered in ways that are wildly exclusionary. So I'm holding a jigsaw in my right hand, and with the jigsaw, cutting out the spaces or the figures, which are then chopped into pieces, assembled as armor, which I put on, and then run and try and fit back through the empty spaces left behind, which of course ends disastrously. The only way really to get through is to move with great caution and slip in sideways, which becomes a bit of a metaphor for how trans people navigate binary gendered public spaces. Next one's a doozy. And this is a piece I did at Bay St. Paul, where I'd set up this very sort of medicalized space where I'm just lying in a bed. I got very tired of these really physical performances, so I started designing performances where I could just lie down the entire time. So here I am lying down, watching a video of all of the like feminine rituals that went into making me look like this. So a lot of plucking and shaving and tweezing and painting of nails and face. And my period is being fed back into my bloodstream, basically. It's an illusion. It's an illusion. But yes, the idea being, the way like gender as a social construct is sort of so tightly knit to our ideas around biology, and how we have these like circuits that we have to kind of break out of because they maintain systems of power that are continuously oppressing all of us, actually. So one question I had when going into my top surgery was, what happens to the breasts when you take them off of my body? I quickly learned that they would be sent down to the pathology department for testing, and then they would dispose of them. So naturally, I asked, can I have them back? My idea was to have them cremated. And even at first, the idea to have them cremated felt really wrong for me. And the reason for that, again, was like a very limited understanding of what it means to be trans, right? I had bought like the mainstream dialogue around it, which for me meant, trans, I had equated it with like being born in the wrong body, quote unquote, or hating one's body. And those lines are actually not really reflective of all trans experiences, right? And they come specifically from the medical literature designed in the 1950s by non-trans doctors who were really interested in like seeking a taxonomy of symptoms so that they could identify the transes and then help them. But the literature is like incredibly binary gendered. And so trans community, what happens? Well, they get their hands on the guidebook and they're like, hey, this is how I get the care. I say these words at doctor will give me what I need. So we have this really healthy feedback loop that doesn't get broken until about the 90s. And I had internalized this script. So for me, cremating my breasts was an ultimate betrayal of that script. But it felt more true to who I was. And I've learned that when something feels deeply wrong, it's often because there's an external system that's clashing with something internal. And I've learned to really lean into those moments of tension. I found them to be incredibly fruitful in terms of the kind of artwork that it's allowed me to produce and the kinds of conversations that those artworks have then led to. So, how does one get one's breasts from the hospital? Well, you contact the patient advocacy rep, who took my request very seriously. And shortly after my surgery, I got a call from the hospital saying, come and pick up your breasts. So one day in October 2013, I drove to the hospital, went to the pathology department. I was handed, they were in boxes, but boxes don't look as good in a book. So I was handed these lovely tubs. I carried them out to the parking lot, buckled them lovingly into the passenger side seat, and drove down the street with the silliest grin on my face, like looking at everyone around me. My boobs are riding shotgun. I did stop at a friend's house for a quick photo shoot. We have the contracts that I had to put in place in order for them to release the breast matter. Tubs, breast matter, self-portrait with breasts, and then a little urn that my partner made with a little nipple hat that comes off. There are no ashes. You need bone matter to make ashes, but it's a symbolic urn. So volume 1 really captures this story of the cremation process with a fantastical ending and a cliffhanger ending, actually. Volume 2, we learn more about the ghosts and their mischievous powers. Volume 3 really is the rise of Phantom Tits. My goal at the start was really just to make one volume. It was a large ask to bring someone else into this process, and it actually took us 4 years to pull that first volume together. And I really, before even 2016, I had written a script. I'd thought, okay, 22 pages, I was being really rigid about it all. And I visualized it, and then Pascal walked back into my life in 2016, just when I was looking for an illustrator, and I said, I've got a project, let's talk. So when I got to the end of volume 1, because it had taken so long, I was very hesitant to say, hey, Pascal, want to keep riding on this train with me? And unprompted, Pascal said, so what's next? And volume 2 and 3, we cranked out in 3 years. And really, I attribute that to the way our collaboration grew and became stronger as we learned to support each other better in our individual roles. So just quickly, and I'm going to break this down, and I'm sure Pascal's going to be like, this is so simplified. But yes, so we would meet, we'd have these great sessions where we would plot the storyline together. here we are being hams, because we had a good background training of that at the National Gallery where we worked together. From that plotting, I would go away and I would write a script and try and visualize, breaking it into pages, hand that to Pascal, who would storyboard it. And then the storyboards become guides or scripts for photo shoots. And we got so good at this by the last photo shoot. To me, at least, it felt like an epic pilgrimage, because the story, it starts at the University of Ottawa, it goes to the National Gallery, and then it goes back to the campus. And so we walked that trail and took photos along the way. And I'd play both of the roles. Pascal, because she's going to have to translate this into illustration, would direct me. Getting some of the angles wasn't always easy, but they were certainly very fun. I was also trying to make my body look like the storyboards, which was very difficult, trying to be a cartoon. Some of my favorite photo shoots would happen actually late at night by myself in my house. When my partner would go to bed, I would stay up and read through the script and do photo shoots where I try and emote every possible feeling that the character would have. And so with these completely absurd photo shoots, we'd also do some location scouting. We would then build mock-ups, right? And this is where I was able to relieve Pascal of some of the labor in this last round, where we'd sort of plop different options in for her to then create. And this is where I'm failing you, Pascal, because Pascal has a whole other, there's probably so much more to tell you about the drawing of it all. All this to say, I hit the collaborator jackpot with Pascal. We both left the gallery. Yeah, please. I left the gallery 2009. Pascal left in 2010. We had worked very closely together for about 5 years. And while Facebook sort of kept us knowledgeable of where each other was and what we were up to, she really very serendipitously, when I was giving a talk much like this one in 2016, was in the audience. I didn't even recognize her, and she came up to me at the end of the talk, and I was like, wow, the timing couldn't be better. The last time I gave a talk about phantom tits, I opened with a gratitude post for Pascal's grandmother. Isabelle Arpin had recently passed away. She was a proud lesbian, which, given her age and the time that she was born, is remarkable, right? She clearly had a strong influence on Pascal. And I remember Pascal telling me about her 80-year-old lesbian grandmother and being like, wow, lucky. And through Pascal, I got to benefit from her marvelous existence, right? Last month, my grandmother passed away. Here she is holding, you can't really read it. It's a rug hooking that my mother made her for her 90th birthday, because she'd said, 90s, that really feels like a new beginning. So it says new beginnings on this rug hooking. And she may not have been queer, but she made a lot of queer choices in her lifetime. I got to spend a week with her about a year ago. And when I arrived at her house, Phantom Tits was on her living room coffee table, where I learned it lived permanently. As she told me, I think it's a really important book, and if I put it on a bookshelf, no one's going to find it. So, to our predecessors, to the people who came before us, who broke ground and flipped scripts for us, may we honor their legacy and continue to seek out our own new beginnings.